Welcome to a brand new allfreeknitting.com video tutorial on how to do the mattress stitch. This is Allison and I will be here to show you how to do the stitch. You will need a tapestry needle and also whatever type of yarn you're using with your pattern. Now as you see, I'm using a plastic tapestry. I feel that these are a little bit easier to work with. And I'm also using a different color yarn so that you guys can see my stitches against the brown yarn I used. Now, as you see, I've already done a couple stitches, and I knit to do the mattress stitch. You need to make sure that you're pulling your stitches apart so that you can see the yarn that you're going to need to loop the yarn you're using to stitch the two pieces together. Now, as you see, I'm pulling the yarn out so that you can see how this mattress stitch is used. It is basically an invisible seam, so you can't see the blue yarn at all. Alright, now I'm going to do a couple stitches and show you slowly how I'm doing it. As you see, I have the blue yarn going underneath the brown in between the two stitches where the horizontal stitch line piece of yarn is. Now on the left hand side, I'm pulling the stitches apart so you can see easily where I'm going to be threading the needle through. Now you thread the needle underneath and you just pull it through. I'm using a lot of yarn here, so bear with me. And now as I pull to the right side, I pull apart the stitches again. Make sure that you do this because you'll see later on I made a little mistake, but you go underneath the yarn and pull through again. So that's a little bit simpler, but as you see, I'm double checking now. Alright. So make sure as you're doing this, you're double checking your work and you're making sure that you're actually going through the correct side. You need to make sure that you're going through the correct yarn on each side of the stitch of the piece, because otherwise you could be ending up pulling yarn through a middle of a stitch, which is the middle of the V, which you'll be able to tell as you go back through and you check over your work. And yeah, again, you put your yarn, pull the needle through underneath the yarn and pull through again on the other side. Now you see I'm not really pulling the stitches apart to make sure that I'm pulling at the right spot, and by doing that I noticed that in the last stitch I pulled at the wrong area. So it's really easy to double check your work, and as you see that I didn't put on the left hand side the needle through the right spot. So you go back and undo that. It's really easy. You just pull the needle out, pull the thread through the right way, and now you see, make sure as you see I'm doing now, pulling the stitches apart, and I'm going in between the two stitches. Now you can also do this stitch through the middle of a stitch, which is a very similar way. All you do is when you're pulling the stitches apart and you're threading the needle through, you make sure that you're doing it on both sides. So if you're pulling through the middle of a stitch, you're pulling the middle of the V, but I am just pulling alongside the side of the stitch. And now see, as you get done, you just pull through and you see that it turns back into the invisible stitch, and you can't tell that the mattress stitch is there. With this being an invisible seam, you can double check your work very easily when you notice that you're knitting in the middle of the stitch on one side and not in the middle of the stitch on the other side, by double checking your work and seeing if the seam matches up perfectly. And make sure that when you're knitting in the middle of the stitch, you're knitting in the middle of the V, but there'll still be a horizontal yarn there. But thank you for joining me today. Please check out more knitting tutorials at www.allfreeknitting.com, and thank you.